Hello everyone, welcome back to Poems That Changed Me. I'm still Dean Rader. This is still Poems That Changed Me World Headquarters here in San Francisco, California. Today's poem's a really good one. It's by Patricia Smith, the great poet Patricia Smith. It's called Undertaker. I'm not going to read the poem. You can see, whatever way it is, that it's really long. And I actually feel like this is one of those poems that is best experienced by the reader reading it in their own voice. And I want to talk about this poem for two or three different reasons. And I will try not to prattle on too long. First is it's one of the single best persona poems that I know of. One of my favorite exercises with my students at the University of San Francisco, beginning or advanced, undergraduate or graduate, is having them write a persona poem. And that is a poem in which the speaker of the poem is clearly not the author of the poem. Normally, it is someone relatively well known, like Eurydice. There is an HD poem earlier in the year I talked about that is spoken from the perspective of Eurydice. A lot of HD poems are women from Greek mythology, but could be poems spoken by Batman, George Washington, any famous character, historical, living, dead, or otherwise. And it's a great tool for getting writers to embody the voice of someone else. In this case, who Patricia Smith embodies is Floyd Williams, a well-known and much loved mortician, I believe in Dorchester, Massachusetts. And Patricia writes the poem from the perspective of Floyd. And one of the things that's so powerful about this is that you, as a reader, get to hear what it's like to attend to young men, and I think in this case you were supposed to imagine young African American men who have been shot, who have been killed, and there is something about reading and hearing Floyd's voice in the first person, the micro details of his job, the emotions that he goes through, that makes this poem more emotionally resonant, more immediate, more personal than if Patricia were to write about Floyd in the third person. So letting him speak for himself, giving him his own words, drives home the point of caring for the dead, caring for those who have died too soon, even more tragic than it already is. The second way this poem really changed things for me is in response to this sense that poetry doesn't really make anything happen, or that writing a poem can't do cultural work. And I want to argue that this poem, because in some ways it's a persona poem, does not wave the flag of activism. It does not beat its drum that it's a protest poem. It does not claim to be an anti-gun violence poem or a poem that is against violence toward African Americans or African American men or African American boys. What it does is it tells a story. And because Patricia is such a great craftsperson, Floyd's story of his work is told so beautifully and told so poignantly that this poem winds up being an advocation for humanity and for love and for, I think, whatever emotion that the reader has that the poem pulls out. Whatever little fire the reader has, this poem ignites that. So I think all of us are going to feel something similar in reading this poem, but also something uniquely personal based upon what your own reaction to this poem is. I would encourage you to take some time, read this poem. I'm going to include a link to a video of Patricia performing it as well. This is a masterful poem, and I'm so glad it's out in the world.